Hey guys, well, it's been 8 days since my most recent surgery for a hernioplasty, basically a hernia surgery. And so what I wanted to do here today is kind of quickly run you through the procedures of getting surgery in the Philippines. I've had 2 surgeries in the last year, so I'll be comparing the differences between the two, the costs, procedures, all that. But first I wanted to say thank you for all the prayers and well wishes that you've given here on the channel as well as over on my Facebook. It's very much appreciated to know that you guys took notice and cared. So what is just start off by saying thank you very much. Now, as I mentioned, a year ago, I had my appendix blow out, and it actually went out while I was at home. It was a bit painful, to say the least, but I guess I have a pretty high threshold for pain. I wrote it off as really bad food poisoning. So I stayed home another 9 days thinking, well, it's just going to pass. And I did a lot of fasting, which was, fortunately, I'd been fasting for 4 days before that. The entire time, the 9 days that it burst, I think that helped me a lot. So by the 9th day, I just couldn't take it anymore. So I actually, at 4 o'clock in the morning, jumped on my bike and rode out to Ace Medical Hospital, which is on Bohol. So both of my surgeries were at Ace Medical Hospital in Bohol. If I remember, I'll put a link there in the description so you know where it's at. In this instance, last year with the appendectomy that I needed, I went in and the procedure was I went into emergency because I was in a lot of pain. I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst, I was at a 9 easily. And so I went in, but I had my passport with me, I had my bank card with me, and I told them what was going on, and they did give me a sheet of paper, just, you know, name, address, basic stuff, just to get me into the system. I'll probably do a different video about medical care in general across the Philippines, but as far as Ace Medical Hospital there in Bohol, I was very happy, and I had no hesitation returning there for my second surgery because everything was very professional, very clean. I'm familiar with hospitals. My mom was a nursing assistant for about 30 years. I did 2 summers of 3 months as a volunteer in the hospital. You know, I did just basic gopher type stuff. I would like ride along with the ambulances to help transport patients, you know, deliver food trays, you know, run stuff to the lab, you know, just basic stuff for like 3 months. I did that twice, so I'm very familiar with hospitals and grading them. And I got to say, Ace Hospital there in Bohol, I'm very happy with it. So I went into emergency at about 4:15 or so in the morning and got signed in. They put me in a little emergency room, and within about 20 minutes, just an initial doctor came to sort of do a triage on me, and within, I would say, about 30 minutes, I was already admitted and put on a bed. Now, the decision you'll need to make, just so that you know when you're part of the whole procedure, you'll need to decide if you want to be in a private room or in a communal room. At Ace Hospital, they call it a men's ward. Other hospitals might call it shared room. But if it's not a private room, then it's the other one. And the only difference is private room, it's either going to be just you in that room alone, or maybe one other patient, maybe. But in the ward, like for instance, where I chose to be, the men's ward, it's usually like at Ace Hospital, it's yourself and there's 5 other beds. Now, it worked out both times that I had surgery, even though there were 6 other beds there, for a good portion, like 2 of the days that I was there, I was the only person in there anyway. There were other days where they had like 2 other patients, maybe they were there for a day or so and then they were discharged. So even if you're in a shared room, you may not even have other people, and it's all separated by curtains. Me, I chose the men's ward room for 2 reasons. One, it is cheaper. On average, it was about, I believe, $17 a day in US currency for each day that I was in the hospital, just for the room, which is pretty darn cheap. Now, the private room, I didn't do it, so I don't know the cost, but I would guess it's maybe $20, $30. It's not much different. Now, the reason I did not opt for the private room is I've gotten anecdotal messages from you guys, and I just wanted to play it a little safe. I have heard, and again, I can't say this with any surety, I'm just telling you what I heard from other guys over the years, is that when you're in a private room, some hospitals will have physicians come by, ask you a couple questions, and next thing you know, it goes down as a consultation. They see, oh, somebody's in a private room, they must have money, let's go make a few bucks. I'm sure that happens. I'm not saying it happened at this hospital because, again, I didn't get a private room. The other thing about a private room is that there are patient rights for Filipinos and foreigners when it comes to leaving the hospital. You have more rights actually in the communal room. When you go to a private room, it's a different type of contract. And again, I don't want to get sidetracked into all that. Maybe I'll cover that at another time, or I'll put a link that you can read about more about that. So for those two reasons, I chose to go with the men's ward or the shared room, and it really was not a problem. It was not an inconvenience. I was in enough pain. I really didn't care if there was 5, 6, or 10 other people in the other side of the curtain. I didn't care about that. So you make up your own mind, but you will need to decide, do you want to be in a private room or shared? Now, still speaking about the appendix from last year, they got me in a bed in about an hour of the time I walked in the door through emergency. They did a chest x-ray, and actually I believe it was a CRT, something like that. And the attending physician saw that, this was pretty bad. And so they went ahead at 5 o'clock in the morning, sent it to who ended up being my surgeon, a very good surgeon. He actually does, his rotation of patients are actually included in Vietnam and Doha. Plus he goes there for different conferences and stuff. So I was fortunate that he was in the Philippines. They contacted him 5 o'clock in the morning. And the reason I share all this is just to give you an idea of how professional everything was handled. They got it to him, through email, sent him the scan. He looked at it, and within 30 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, he was from his house at my bedside to tell me, you need surgery now. He goes, right now, they're preparing the surgery room, and we're going to have you under the knife here within about 45 minutes. I'm going to go wash up. And I remember one of the last things I told him before he left, I said, thank God. I go, I'm glad you guys are all over this. I said, if I had a kitchen knife within reach, I swear to God, I would cut it out myself. I was in that much pain. So roughly 2 hours from the time that I walked into emergency, I was going under anesthesia. They did the procedure, the surgery, the appendectomy. Strange thing is, they actually, when I woke up, they handed me a little Tupperware jar with my appendix. It was pretty gross. And I'm used to seeing blood and raw meat, whatever. But the reason it was gross is because it had actually turned black. I mean, it had rotted inside of me for 9 days. I was like, this is a biohazard. This needs to go somewhere. So in that case, I stayed in the hospital another 5 days. I was really cut up just because they had to irrigate my abdominal cavity. There was high risk of sepsis because it sat there for 9 days and rotted, and they really had to do a number on me. So I stayed under observation for 5 days. Again, that was like $17 a day for the hospital, so it really wasn't much. They had to use staples. I ended up getting an infection because of, again, they were pumping me full of a lot of antibiotics. So long story short, That took me about 6 to 7 weeks to recover at home after they sent me home. And there were follow-ups with the surgeon. I won't go into all the gory details because, yeah, it was a very painful recovery. But I did recover. Now, the total cost for the appendectomy last year, with the hospital fees, the surgical room, the anesthesiologist, the blood tests that were required, everything, the hospital stay, the whole ball of wax came to 2,400 US dollars. Now there was another $800 that we spent out of, I paid the whole thing cash. Again, well, maybe I'll do another video on the pros and cons of being self-insured, but I did everything self-insured. So when it came time to leave, you know, they took me in a wheelchair down to billing. I paid them. They gave me a receipt, and we were done. Now that was 2,400 US dollars for all of that. But the entire time I was in the hospital, V, my wife, was with me. She was there to be my watcher. That's what they call it in the hospital, a watcher in the Philippines. You don't get, when you need medications, you don't get a nurse who runs off and brings it to you. You have to have a watcher, somebody there. The doctor will hand the prescription to your watcher, and then they can either go to the pharmacy that's in the hospital, or usually, almost every time, there's 2-3 pharmacies outside the hospital, like right across the street. And they will go, your watcher, to pay for it, bring it back, and then hand it to the attending nurse, and then they will put it into your IV or whatever they need to do. So now we spent an extra $800 on that. Now that was because they were, like I said, they were pumping me full of a lot of antibiotics. They had me going through, I think I went through 3 bottles of the saline solution, the IV, because they were trying to really flush me out. So it was about $800. So if you take the 2,400, the 800, we're talking 3,200 total, you know, by the time I walked out the door. So then skip forward to this last week, and I actually began the process 3 weeks ago. I went and sat down with the same surgeon, really good guy, again, very, very knowledgeable. I had, you know, just all the confidence I needed in him. We talked about the hernia, which was now sticking out of my side about the size of a small grapefruit. It was pretty big, but not painful, fortunately. He just said, well, when did this start? Now, right now, it's April. It actually started end of October, but you know, I told him, he's like, well, why are you just coming in now? I said, well, October, you know, was my buddy's wedding, Gio's wedding. So October, I didn't want the surgery to keep me from being there. And then that was in November. And then December, I had already given my word to V that I would be there for her, you know, with her parents for Christmas. So I didn't want to delay that, you know, because of the surgery. And then in January, I left for California because it was going to be my mom's 90th birthday. And there's just no way I was going to miss that. So I did kind of take a chance delaying, but being as how there was no pain involved, I just made the decision to wait, you know. And so now here we are, April. So, but I actually started earlier. After I spoke with him, he gave me a list of tests to get done with an internal medicine guy. Now, those blood tests, X-ray and EKG, that was only about $150 US dollars, okay, for all of it, I think the most expensive thing was the battery of blood tests that they did. So the IM gave me a certificate of clearance for surgery, that I was healthy enough. I gave that to the surgeon, and then he submitted that to the hospital in order to schedule a room time slot with surgery. So a week ago, roughly 8 days ago, this time the admission was a little different, because the first time I came in, it was an emergency. It was a true emergency. They didn't do blood work. There was none of this. It was, you know, you're going to die if we don't get you on the table. So it was a very quick process. This time, I went in and walked into admissions the day before the surgery, so we had plenty of time. V and I, we went to admissions, and well, let's just say it was kind of comical. We went to admissions, and they said, "Oh, okay, well, we understand. Okay, we have you on record. Yes, you're scheduled for surgery tomorrow morning. Go over to emergency and show them this paper, and they'll get you going." So we went to emergency and showed them the piece of paper, and they said, "Oh, you need to go to the triage person first. They're just on the other side of the wall." So we went out there, talked to the triage guy, and he said, "Oh, well, you need to go to the pharmacy first." And I was like, "Why would I go to the pharmacy?" He goes, "Well, you need to put down your deposit." Now, I didn't have to put down a deposit when I came in as emergency. Again, that's not going to apply at all hospitals. It's because I was at Ace Hospital. That was their policy. Maybe because I was a foreigner, whatever. They didn't require a deposit when I went in for the appendectomy. But this time, they said, "Okay, you got to go to the pharmacy and put down a deposit before we can admit you to a room." And I was like, "Okay." So I went to the pharmacy. I said, "Hey, I'm here to, pay my deposit. How much is that going to be?" So they said 50,000 pesos, which at the current exchange rate, I think it worked out to like 870 US dollars. So be prepared for that. Some hospitals may only want a $500 deposit, which would be like roughly 25,000 peso deposit. At Ace Hospital, it was 50,000. So I went ahead, gave them that. They gave me a receipt. I went back to emergency, and then they admitted me to a room. So for the hernia surgery, it was a lot less painful. Overall, just a much easier experience than the appendectomy. So to give you, if you ever have to do either one of the two, expect a bit of pain with the appendectomy. The hernia surgery, not so bad. Now for the hernia surgery, I only needed to be in the hospital a total of 3 nights. Whereas I was in for like 5 days with the appendectomy. Now the total for the hospital stay, the surgeon's fees, the hospital, all the ball of wax for the hernia surgery came to $1,500. I mean, I'm just rounding off. It was like $1,497. So let's just call it $1,500. But unlike the appendectomy where they were fighting off infection, this time we only spent $200, out of pocket for pharmacy type items. It really wasn't much. Instead of going through 3 bottles of IV liquid a day, I was only going through 1 a day. And I was taking liquid antibiotics through the IV. Later, they gave me, tablet antibiotics when I discharged. So that was only like a total of $1,700 plus the $150 I spent on the pre-lab. So we're talking $1,850 all together for the surgery and everything, the tests, everything out of pocket. Again, maybe I'll do a video later about the pros and cons of self-insuring. Again, it all depends on your situation, your risk level, a couple different factors. But that's how it worked out for me. Now, something to keep in mind is, as I mentioned, you need to have a watcher. Usually that's a Filipina, somebody you trust that you can, hand money to and say, "Okay, go to the pharmacy," or give them your card, whatever. Now with V, what I found worked really convenient is I just loaded up her Gcash with about $800, and turned out we only needed like 200. So I just told her, "Well, just keep the rest, put it in your savings." But with the Gcash, she was able to just go across the street, get whatever she needed. If it was late at night, she didn't have to be carrying cash. She could just walk across the street from the hospital, pay it with Gcash, and come back with what we needed. So that's very helpful. Now, if you find yourself needing to stay in a hospital for a couple of days, this is something, you single guys who don't have a girlfriend that you trust need to kind of think about. If you don't have a woman in your life that you could trust to be your watcher, you're kind of in a bad spot, because you're going to need somebody. I mean, if push comes to shove, you may have to ask one of the nursing attendants or whatever, hey, I'll give you some money if you run to the pharmacy for me, which means you're going to spend more money. I mean, I suppose that's a possibility. I don't even know if company policy would allow for that. Or you're going to need to know another expat who can hang out there to be your watcher, somebody, again, that you trust to go and get your pharmaceutical needs. The other thing is with V, in both cases, like I said, I did the ward, the shared room arrangement for the hospital, and it just turned out that the bed next to mine was available. So she was able to sleep there at the hospital. They knew she's my watcher, it was okay. But if somebody had been assigned to that bed on both sides of me, what they had was a wooden bench, a flat wooden bench. And as far as they're concerned, your watcher has two choices: either sleep on the wooden bench or go home and come back later. So they're not going to provide pillows or bedding or any of that. So just something to keep in mind. Again, this is going to vary hospital to hospital, but Ace Hospital, that was the arrangement. Other hospitals, again, what kind of bench is available? They might only have chairs available for your watcher. They may or may not allow them to sleep on the other bed with or without a charge. In our case, they let V use the empty bed next to me, and there was no extra charge for that. So something to keep in mind if you're single and you don't have a Filipina in your life that you really trust. Hopefully you got a buddy you can count on. So that's the basics of my two surgeries, and I'm glad to report everything went great. I'm actually healing a lot faster this time than I did from the appendectomy, and it's only been 8 days. Within 5 days, I was already on my motorbike. V and I rode around town, and we did a little short there on, I think it was on YouTube. And I'm still in pain, but only when I cough or sneeze. It just feels like a samurai katana stuck in my gut. Other than that, 10 being worst, I'd say my pain level is about a 3.5 right now. Mostly on the inside, the external, the stitches have already healed up. So any other questions you have, just put them in the comments, and we'll just go from there.